My name is Michael Allison. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the State of Louisiana. We are happy to be here. This is Matthew Vince. He's the Chief Design Officer. We survived last night's beer boarding by Deloitte, and we don't see Mary Lou and Naresh, but definitely want to thank them for being our accountability buddies, making sure we got home in time and was responsible so we can come out here and present to you. Homage to the legal department for CA, so make sure that that is there. Apparently that's in all the presentations, and we just need to point that out.
Right. So I'll give you a little background about Louisiana. So we have about 4.5 million, 4.65 million residents. Prior to 2014, we had 16 agencies in the state that all had their own IT department. So for public safety, their own IT department, tax, their own IT department. Things were very fragmented and separate. In 2014, a law was passed in Louisiana consolidating all of IT. So with that, OTS, the Office of Technology Services, was created. That brought all of IT services under one organization. This single organization supports all of the executive branch agencies. It's about 32,000 of our 40,000 employees. It's all aspects of IT, from development, infrastructure, databases, procurement, everything. And all told, we've got about 850, 860 employees we employ. Some of our big challenges in the state of Louisiana, we have 16 agencies we support, but we're trying to present them to citizens as if they're just one central government. Prior to consolidation, and even today, there's a bit of a lack of standardization and documentation. Our struggle really is to pull this all together into one cohesive vision. And part of that comes in from our partnerships with federal agencies like CMS. CMS is the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. They back our Medicaid program, which is what this project really is all about. They have a concept called MIDA, which is really, it's a design philosophy to start to break things up into modules, into services. It's what we've been talking about this whole conference, I think. The idea of service-oriented design, the kind of microservices, all those great things, API economy, right? Some of the problems we have, though, really revolve around funding. State funding can be very tricky at times. We have a lot of one-time funding, we have grant money, sometimes self-sustained money, but really it's all about what the present state of the economy is, what taxes look like, and those kinds of things. Also, between the federal partners, there's about 15 different design standards. So, and 15 different laws and data protection and privacy laws, and they don't really mesh together very well. And the last real big problem, I think, is really the lack of an integrated vision from the federal government. We see, CMS wants us to go 100% cloud. And we see this as really a more hybrid world. We will always have some aspect of on-premise development, and I think cloud fits in there, but I don't think Louisiana is ready for 100% cloud.
No, and to add to that, some of the other pressures that we have, especially for the state of Louisiana, we have a significant deficit going into this fiscal year. Then on top of that, we have some natural disasters. We had the major flooding at the end of the summer. That also impacted the infrastructure. And so between the floods earlier in the year, the major flooding that we had toward the end of the summer, that also impacts our funding sources as general funds are not available. And that compounds, again, our ability to take this approach and then keep it sustainable for years to come. What we wanted to do is really look at developing solutions that met strict SLAs, strict RTOs, strict RPOs. We wanted to build and start defining technology as services rather than these monolithic pillars that CMS and other federal partners have been known to support in the past. CMS going to, with their MIDA standards, requiring that we have a COT solution that is modular, that we look at standards such as SOA, TOGAF, ITIL, or ITIL, depending upon where you are in the world. These type of governance, these type of frameworks are not typically adopted and leveraged by state and local governments. These are fairly new. History tells us that we build big systems and we let it run for 30 years. We still have a large technology debt. We have code running on mainframes that are over 30 years old, and we have to look at this and how do we modernize that in an effort to not only meet the needs of the constituents, but also a constituent that is used to mobile, quick access, on-demand access at their fingertips. The state is, for the most part, well behind that. Okay. One of my mentors used to tell me this all the time. You know, people don't care how a microwave heats up their soup; they just want hot soup. And as my CIO, she would drive home the fact that we need to present technology in a manner that as a consumer, you don't necessarily want to know or need to know how all that works in the background. It needs to be very seamless, intuitive, it needs to meet your specifications and requirements. And as soon as you as a consumer starts asking me, how is that, or what does the APM say, or how does that fault tolerance working, I've lost you from a IT perspective. So we always have to think about embracing that provider model, presenting services first, looking at the constituents, and looking at it from a business-centric rather than a technology-centric view. One of the challenges that we also have is how do we transition a state IT workforce from the traditional monolithic siloed into an agile workforce that can adopt emerging technologies. We have about 25 to 30% of our workforce could retire today with full benefits. We have a challenge with recruiting out of universities. No one wants to come out of college and go work on a COBOL mainframe. It's just not sexy, right? They want to do all these things that impact their lives on a very micro and agility scale. Things that we have to start looking at is the adoptions of automation and orchestration, and then build our services to exceed the customer expectations. I'm going to be very honest. The expectations for the ability for SLED to produce is very low. So we only have one direction to go. And we have to overcome these challenges when we start looking at providing services.
All right, that's a great point, and a lot of that starts with the way we at OTS present ourselves, and really that's putting the customers first and OTS last, and we have two sets of customers. We have our agencies we support, and then in turn, their customers who are our citizens. And so really it's the citizens and constituents number one, it's our agency second, and OTS is last. And what that really means is instead of having an IT organization that brings a solution in search of a problem, we work with the customer first, understand their initiatives, their challenges, and find solutions that fit with them. And the bigger picture is really, once we do that, find a way to make those services fit in the larger scheme. Because chances are, with 16 agencies and the same consumers, the same citizens, the challenges are very similar. If we can bring a service, we can bring that forward and share that service across multiple agencies, then all of a sudden we've got some pretty huge gains. And so some of the things Mike's talked about how we build upon that, things like SOA and ITIL and TOGAF, we're kind of really hitching our cart to that kind of model, because formerly IT in state government was very much reactive. We don't want to be reactive anymore. We want to be proactive to our customers. What that really means is having a pretty strong demand for standards, for requirements, and for governance. And really it's about modularity, choosing COTS over custom, choosing SaaS providers where applicable. And then if all of a sudden we've extended ourselves into the SaaS and the COTS and the cloud world, how do we secure that and put that really, tie a bow around it and make sure we're not exposing customer data?
So our approach really was to build an enterprise cloud strategy. We've been asked a lot of questions about how we were leveraging public cloud, how are we leveraging our existing infrastructure, and one of my common responses is the strategy of leveraging and using a public cloud is more important than actually using it. I need to be able to have an infrastructure, I need to have services that support our ability to burst into the cloud, or be able to live in that enterprise cloud, or even my old traditional converged technology. When we started looking at how to present services to our agencies and then to their constituents, we really sat back and said we have a need for a truly enterprise cloud solution. build a foundation that has the elasticity to, again, go from ground to cloud, but also have the cloud to ground options as well. We chose Nutanix Hyperconverge for our infrastructure hardware. We are leveraging VMware, their ESXi and NSX platforms to allow us then to stretch that vSphere across 2 data centers. We have about 5 millisecond latency between our 2 data centers within Baton Rouge. And then with NSX, it allowed us to drive that layer 2, layer 3 traffic into the hypervisor. When we decided to go all virtual and go into a hyperconverged platform, it made no sense for us to take all that traffic and then move that back into your traditional network. That east-west traffic now becomes north-south, and we would then have to have these large monolithic type global load balancers, and that made absolutely no sense. So NSX really came that missing link for us in really taking advantage of a hyperconverged platform and really coming up with an active-active topology. And also, from a security perspective, our information security team, and specifically my CISO, absolutely loved it. The microsegmentation really cleaned up the complex access lists and allowed him to have another tool in his defense and depth strategies. So it really took a life of its own. It did delay our project, I'm not going to lie. I kept on challenging Deloitte to become my at this, and they did step up, and we had some very good partnerships. The reason why we did all of that is so that I can then take my core service, which is our IAM solution, and make sure that it is always ready. Active across 2 data centers, 99.9% uptime plus, and hopefully nothing like this happens, but if I crater an entire data center, I may use some transactions in flight, but I will operate and I'll stay up and running at my other data center. We have 2 services that we call our core, our enterprise service bus and our IAM. IAM has to come first. I can't authenticate, can't use anything else. So we needed to take this technology, put it in a position that then I can take our CAIM solution, put it on top of that, and have it as robust as I can possibly have. And now with some of the new announcements, the ability to now potentially take this and my NSX with the marriage with AWS services and extend that into the public cloud, now I have a seamless ability to go from ground to cloud, cloud to ground as I need to. So it's been a very good marriage for us.
Right, and having IAM as one of our core services is pretty critical. Our view here is that not only for Medicaid, but I want the entire state to be on our single sign-on. Today we have thousands of systems with their own authentication schemes. Who knows how much risk we have lying out there. So the more systems I can bring into this, the more services we can expose, the more I have integrated into IAM, the better customer experience, the better citizen experience we're going to have. And that's really the vision here, is that through these sets of shared services, IAM being core, all of a sudden, these back-end services now become seamless. From a customer, I have one account, I have one entry point, things look similar as I travel between agency to agency. That kind of fragmented government now starts to look a little more cohesive. And that's really what the big vision here is.
Yep. So we just got a couple more slides, and this is just basically our topology that we have, and this is how we actually built out our IDM architecture. We also have another slide, it's almost identical, except it has the single sign-on portion of it. We're leveraging Microsoft as our database. We're using Always On. We have 2 sync copies, 1 async copy. That was key for us. We wanted to be able to leverage the read capabilities of a multiple database that, again, because of our leveraging of Nutanix, the extended vSphere, VMware HA, we were able to really build an infrastructure that allowed for us to take advantage of the multiple reads, but also have that agility to transfer and migrate key services over. At the very top, we have some NetScaler global load balancers. They do my layer 5, layer 7 health checks. So they look at the health of the total application stack, and we can then migrate as required between the 2 data centers. For our non-core, again, our service bus and our IAM solution are almost identical in how we have an active-active topology. Again, it was very, very critical for us to get this right. I don't get this right, people can't authenticate, they can't do their job. So the reliance on this one service now became that cornerstone for everything else that we're going to build on. We believe that this is a solution that is not only translates well to other states, but we also think it translates well to private and commercial space. And then our goal is then to take this and extend it into our public cloud once we get that ability to take our NSX solutions and that microsegmentation and be able to honor that, so that whenever all of our federal partners come to do their audits, I don't have to worry about two different types of security zones. I don't have to worry about two types of rules, access control lists, all that. All of it is seamless. And then from a constituent and consumer perspective, it's all the same, right? It is seamless on the back end, and that's exactly what his vision was, and hopefully we're going to turn that into a reality.
And one of the take-home numbers for us here, really, I mentioned before we have about 4.5 million citizens in Louisiana, and in this solution for our first Medicaid project, we'll get about 1.5 million of those in the first go. So we'll be over a quarter of the way there with our first system. Systems in the future, we have other major health initiatives, we have other major social services initiatives, SNAP and TANF, which are benefits for social services. We could see another 1.5 million just in those two, and then be sitting well over halfway there. And we talk about adding in motor vehicles and tax, and all of a sudden, we're well beyond our goal. And that's just the horizon in the next really couple of years. So we're really excited about exposing these services, having them out there, the high availability plan. It all comes together, I think.
Yep. And again, next slide. It's very similar topology. Again, leveraging best of breed approaches. Just to kind of round out how we approach this is our requirements for the solution had to be highly available not only within the data center, so we have a lot of clustering, have active within it, but also we have to have that reliability between data centers, so the active between the two. And again, it wasn't just the CA product, we had to layer the various technologies. My challenge to CA and VMware and Microsoft was I want the right layer of technology to do what it's best at doing, and not try to force another layer to do something that it could do, but not best at. So it took us a lot of design and redesign before we came up with this approach. Ultimately, we're leveraging the CA's ability to recover itself from an application level to be one of our primary methods, and then we go back down the stack with VM to recover from the VM crash, and then Nutanix from hardware. And again, my net scalers constantly checking that health, that layer 5, layer 7 to ensure it's in the right data center for production. Go ahead.
So we're going to invite Thomas Beck. He's been our boots on the ground from Deloitte. He's our project leader for the Deloitte team on this project, and so he's going to give us a little background on what Deloitte's seeing, not only in state and government, but really beyond that, how these types of systems can come about in these other areas. Yeah,
what was important for me when we were asked to do this is, I do believe that our approach is the best approach, but we also know there's other ways out there. Since we have a very strong relationship with Deloitte, we wanted to see if he can bring other viewpoints from other states, other business verticals, et cetera. So we're very happy to have Thomas on board.
Thanks, guys. Are acoustics good out there right now? Good, awesome. Sounds like there's an air raid going on right now. I feel like the 101st Airborne is flying over us and land on the building. It's pretty crazy. I'm going to keep it down to 4 topics. I know I get to your questions if you have any questions here, so we can honor the time and get through our allotted time. I have 4 topics I'm going to go through. A lot of these have been topics of sessions during the week, as well as things that Mike and Matt covered up here. The 4 things I'm going to go through in terms of things that Deloitte sees across states in terms of identity and access management especially. Number 1 is going to be statewide IAM, which is exactly what these gentlemen are trying to get to. Number 2 is going to be cloud. 3 is going to be privileged access management, and number 4 will be protocols. interestingly enough. So I'll start off with statewide. Statewide IAM is something that I think every state aspires to, and you would think, well, why wouldn't you do this? Why is this so hard? But the bureaucracy, the machine of government sometimes works against us in these cases, and we really see two ways that states are going about this. Way one is a top-down approach. This is the way Louisiana is going. They've actually thought about this. They've got an organization in place from the top down. It's bringing this down and implementing this across the entire state, as Matt alluded to. The other way we see is bottom up. We see single agencies succeed in implementing IAM, implementing it at scale, and then getting essentially elevated or promoted to an enterprise service and a center of excellence. So there's two ways of going about this, but either way succeeds for states based upon their conditions. Matt talked about some of the benefits for citizen and user experience. One of the other benefits as well is once we've bought into this infrastructure and we've got CA IAM from running, the actual return on investment calculations, and we've got a pretty serious algorithm that we use for cost allocation, is higher here or quicker here than any place else. Because once we've made the investment, every single user we add and every other single system we retire from there on out either saves money or it lowers the per user cost for an additional agency. So there's a really serious ROI, so a serious business case we made for doing this first before doing any other services. That's number one. Number two, cloud. I think we talked a lot about cloud here. The cloud play for the state, especially in Louisiana, has been around architecting a solution that, as Mike alluded to, is ready to go to the cloud when we get there. So we've got a solution that runs in a software-defined data center, such that we could essentially pick it up and move the entire solution to the cloud when the time comes. Yep. So that's approach number one. Approach number two, and I'll plug for a colleague of mine who's doing a session a little later today around integration with cloud services, because we see this as well. He'll talk about Office 365 integration with CA's products, but we see a lot of that as well. So if you're not going to the cloud and you're using SaaS services, how do you use the identity and access management you have on-prem to integrate with SaaS services that are in the cloud? That's the other thing we're seeing big. What we're not seeing a lot of is people going to cloud-native identity and access management, at least in the state government space. You see a little bit more of it in the commercial space, but in state government, folks are staying on-prem or going ground to cloud is what we're seeing the most of. Number three on my list is privileged access management. Apparently we share some of that with folks in the audience. We talked about that before with some of the participants. So PAM has been really big. It's been around in state government for sort of been kicking around for 5 or 6 years, but in the last 2 years, the feds have now mandated it. So it's become a very serious business where they've gotten very serious about the protection PAM offers and the breach control it offers. So now it's table stakes now for state government. So we're seeing a lot of PAM implementations because the feds have now mandated it for a lot of their systems. And the last item on the list is protocols. I don't want to overlook this one. So we've had a religious war going on for years. The SOAP versus REST protocol. I think within the walls of the enterprise, we've done well with SOAP for many, many years. But now the challenges of mobile, of integration with other SaaS services, have forced us all to think about REST, about OAuth. So scary things. I know amongst ourselves we've had a lot of conversations about how to get to OAuth. Our CISO, who wasn't here today, we've had some really interesting and challenging conversations. There's distrust of anything that's not WS Star, that's not SAML. But I think we're getting there. But it's one of the things I think every state is grappling with: is how do we get from the things we've been comfortable with for the last 10 years in the solo world to a whole new set of protocols and standards. So those are the four things. I think right now we're all done and we're up for Q&A right now.
Any questions? Anybody? Yes, we got a microphone right there.
So you mentioned design and redesign. Can you elaborate on that? What were the reason for redesigns, or how long did it take you, or?
So the original topography was around some V-blocks from EMC, and we did not want to go with a converged type of approach or your more traditional. We really wanted to have a more agile hardware platform. So the first big redesign was, how do you tackle hyperconverge? It is going 100% virtual. Even my SQL servers was unique to the angst of my DBAs. They're like, why would we ever do this? But it provided so many new layers of protection, new tools. The second big redesign came because we did not have that NSX solution, the ability to virtualize my layer 2, my layer 3 traffic. So everything was coming out of my hypervisor and my hyperconverged platform and going onto my traditional network, just to come right back down. So my east-west traffic was now north-south, and we saw a lot of ballooning in our network traffic that didn't need to be there. So the decision to go with NSX brought in a lot of that. Now I got 2 data centers. I got less than 1 millisecond seek time. How do I engineer my vSpheres and my virtual space to take advantage of the technology that we had? So that was actually, do we do a metro available cluster with the Nutanix? Do we stretch the vSphere? All of these things, we tried different iterations. So it took us about 2 months. Literally of rework and delay. And again, I take 100% responsibility for that. But we wanted to get it right, and we had to get it right the first time. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.